In this lesson, we'll begin modeling and sculpting our terrain. Alright, so we're in good shape so far. So we're at a point now where we don't have too many elements in the way, but what I do want to do is I want to start separating things into layers. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my infrastructure that we basically have in place here, which is going to be my walkways and parking and kind of stuff like that. And we could put that on a layer. So I'm going to grab that element and we're going to come to this tool and we're going to add a layer. So we'll call this one walkways and parking. Now the benefit to working with layers is once you start working on your site, especially when you're working with site elements like trees and a lot of those high def or high res elements, that can really affect the performance of SKETCHUP. So right about now I can orbit around and everything's working pretty smoothly. But once we start getting things like trees and cars and things that have a lot of geometry and components attached to it, it's going to really affect. So we'll be trying to make a move and it'll move and it'll actually pause and freeze and move and pause and freeze. So what basically chopping your model up into layers will do, it'll allow you to freeze what layers you don't want to be on at the moment. And this will give you better visibility when you're working your model, but it'll also help you improve the performance of your model. You'll start to see what I'm talking about as we're working. So again, let's add another layer to this guy, and this one is going to be called our building. So we could say building form. Building form A. That'll be our first form. So while we're here, let's go ahead and add another layer. I'm going to add this layer is going to be my terrain. I know we're going to have trees. Let's go ahead and add that. So we could say trees. And then maybe we want a layer for the water feature we're going to have. So I'm going to add water. So this will break it up nicely. And so the main one we're probably going to want to freeze is these trees because they have a tendency to kind of freeze up your workflow. So we're in good shape now. So I can click on this guy and that should be on my building layer. And if it's not, building form A. And let's go ahead and group up our sidewalk as well. So layers and grouping are going to save you a ton of time. So hit G. Here you can say walkways and parking. So now that we're getting organized and now that we're creating good habits here, we're ready to start adding some terrain to this guy. So you can see it looks like a lot more components, but in a way it's only two. So now we can work with our surface. So to access your tools, if you don't already have it located here on top, you can just come to the top bar here, and if you right click, you should be able to access the option to add other windows here. Should help me out here if it doesn't, but if not, you can come to tools, you can come down here to sandbox, and then we have plenty of tools to work with here. But just right click, add your sandbox tools, and it'll bring this up. So what we need is this from scratch tool. So what you're going to do is you're going to click on from scratch, and then we're just going to basically define how far we want to go in this direction and then how far we want to go in that direction. And that's going to create our surface, our subdivided surface that we can later continue to subdivide depending on the amount of detail we're trying to incorporate into our surface. So I'll show you how it works. So we're going to go from this point to this point and then all the way across. And if we've measured this out properly, it should go by tens, and I think on this side it went by tens. This side we may want to do it to 5. So we can come up here, click on from scratch again, and here under grid spacing, just type in 5 feet, and now we can go, actually type in 5 feet one more time, 5 feet. So now we should be able to go from this point to this point, and we have our even number of grids and spacing in place. And I can come back in here in the middle and do the same thing here. So I'll go just so we can clean up that area. So we'll go from there all the way to, we'll say about this point. Basically to where we can get a full grid and we can erase anything else that we may not need. So I'm going to bring it up to about that point. So we have some additional geometry we can erase right inside this particular grid area. So I'm going to double click it. Use some line work, draw in a nice little triangle to create a little surface that I can then come in and erase without affecting the rest of my surface, like so, as long as it's within my triangle there. I'm getting a little bit closer, and that should take care of that. So basically the goal was to make sure I have my terrain and stuff on the inside, basically all the way around, and I didn't want to have any issues with terrain right there. So now I'm going to clean up some of the rest of the geometry on this side, so we can double click on this guy, and what I want to do is I want to get rid of the additional overlapping stuff here that may possibly be, actually it's not even overlapping this, so we're actually in good shape there. So we're good to go. Main thing is making sure everything's cleaned up. We want full squares. Again, taking into account when you're laying this out, how you're going to be meshing this out helps out quite a bit. So this will actually be grass in here as well, so we can go back to our tool here, and we're going to go from this side to this side. Actually, we'll do it on this side. We'll go from here to that point, all the way up. And now we actually need to change this grid spacing here. It looks like things are off just a little bit. And what we should have done was actually should have kicked out our curb surface outward. So let's go ahead and do that really quick. So let's erase what we did earlier. And that might seem a little bit of annoying, but just double click on your surface so you don't erase everything. So we're going to go ahead and erase this line and that line, but we're going to go ahead and keep the inner curb that we had. So now what I want to do is I want to apply the surface now so that we can get it to fit in there nice and evenly. So then we'll go back to our tool here. Do a quick measurement first. So I'm going to measure, make sure it's an even number, 30. Yes, it is. We can get rid of this surface now. And then we'll put in this surface. We'll go from this point to this point, bring it all the way up. And now we can double click on it and get rid of anything else we don't need here. Grab my eraser tool. So it should fit nicely on that curve, and it does. So that's going to be the approach we take for the rest of this. So let's do it one more time on this side so you can get a feel for what we're doing here. And we're going to want to make sure we apply this to the right layer. Actually, it's going to be terrain. So what we need to do is we need to go ahead and let's do that right now. So apply this to terrain. Apply this one to terrain. Double click on this. Let's take this one, apply it to terrain. And we'll double click on this one again. Since this one is part of this, right click and explode it really quick. Right? And then we can go back and grab that surface again. But we're going to deselect the terrain this time. So hold down Control, or I'm sorry, Shift. Select each terrain surface here. And then type in, we'll go ahead and G that up, and we'll call this one walkways and parking again. And again, the reason for doing that was we just, instead of offsetting outward, we offsetted inward, which caused a 6-inch problem here with our surface. So we're in good shape. We can mess around with our curves and stuff a little bit later. So we took care of this one. Now all we've got to do is do the same thing for this side. So we'll do it really quick. So again, we'll double click on this surface. We'll go ahead and get rid of this line using my erase button, this bottom, this side, and this top. And what we're doing is we're going to keep this line. So anything extra here we can get rid of as well. We can now get rid of this surface. And now we can add in our from scratch tool. So I'm going to go from there to here, bring it up. Go ahead and we'll go ahead and select that. Don't right click or anything, but we're going to add that to our terrain layer. Double click on it, and let's get rid of these 4 squares. And grab your eraser, and we'll knock these out as well, so it fits nice and clean on this corner as well. So far so good. So we'll take the same approach that we've kind of been using throughout. And then I'll go ahead and finish off the top corners here. So when you come back in the next lesson, we'll have all of our surfaces in place. And then we'll start working with sculpting tools to really make this thing come to life. So I'll meet you in the next lesson where we'll start sculpting out our terrain.